What's going on, Packers fans? Welcome into Pack-A-Day Happy Hour. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. And of course, the podcast at Pack-A-Day Podcast. Thank you so much for being here. We are presented today by Luiges Frozen Pizzas. And right now, we're going to be watching a little bit of USA hockey, which is off to a 2-0 lead, which is great. But what a great time to get yourself some Luiges Pizza, enjoy happy hour, watch some hockey. What more could you possibly want? We've been talking all week about all the different Luiges pizzas, but the one that's coming up for next week, I'm really excited about that we're going to be talking about, which is the Gourmet Pizza Parlor Pepperoni Pizza, which is one of my favorites. Wisconsin mozzarella. Go check it out. Beautifully seasoned pepperonis. Definitely worth getting a few and getting it ready for March Madness as well. So check them out over at luigespizza.com and, of course, on social media at Luiges Pizza. Cannot recommend it enough. We have about an hour, right around probably an hour to get to as many questions as I possibly can over the course of that time. I also want to give a huge shout out to Tom Grassi. Make sure that you're checking out his live streams as well, doing a great cause for charity. So as soon as we're done here, make sure to go check out Tom as well. I want to give him a shout out also. Let's start with our, I should also note that we are on Twitch today as well. So if you're checking us out over on Twitch, appreciate that. We'll start with our super chats right away. Southpaw, thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member. Mando, thank you so much for becoming a YouTube member. The Man 5705. Would GM Andy go all in for Max Crosby, even if it hurts our chances to fix other weaknesses? Bears might be in the mix. I would not for Max. We talked about today some outside of the box sort of ideas, and I pitched the idea of going and getting a Trey Hendrickson or a Jalen Phillips, which I think would be really, really fun. The reason I'd be in on that a little bit more, even though I think that's probably a little unrealistic as well, more than Max Crosby, I think Crosby is going to get at least a first-round pick, maybe more than that. Green Bay doesn't have the draft capital to trade the amount that Green Bay would have to trade because they don't have the first-round picks. They have one to trade theoretically, or not theoretically, but technically in 2028? So they could trade their 2028 first-round pick. There's just no way. You're not giving up, a first-round pick in 2028. Plus, it might take like your third-round pick this year, I should say, and giving Max Crosby the giant deal. That gets way too much. So Crosby, no. If you wanted to double up and really make your defensive end room insanely potent, you could get a Jalen Phillips or a Trey Hendrickson on the open market, but Crosby is probably, even those are probably a step too far. That this one would be 2 or 3 steps too far. Ben, thank you so much for, I think, re-becoming a member, if I remember correctly, but appreciate you nonetheless. And then Dakota Fire. Andy, do you think Whalen needs to fake a punt once or twice this year just to keep teams on their toes? Last season, Matt Rich said he had practiced it. Hold on. First of all, Dakota, we fence is dead. We never have to use that term ever again. It's dead. It's gone. It's over. You can think what you want about Rich Bisaccia. I know most people are excited to go in a different direction, but we never have to use that term ever again. It was the corniest, cringeworthiest word that you could ever possibly put together. Not a fan of the term. Don't ever want to say it again. So it's dead. We don't need to say it. But to your question, I talked about this earlier this week. I did a full episode on what Green Bay can do to fix their special teams once and for all. 2 of the points that I had is, 1, they need to be a bit more creative and on the precipice of new ideas. Even if they're not the one that created it, they need to be fast adopters to some of the best ideas that are out there on special teams, because with some of the new rules, these are evolving sort of constantly at the moment. The second thing is, I do need to see a little bit more. Now, one of the, ideas is you have to crawl before you can walk, right? Green Bay special teams has been so bad. Do you really want to get more advanced into doing fake stuff and things like that? My answer is yes. It doesn't need to be exotic. It doesn't need to be crazy, but even a fake reverse on a kick return, or again, maybe you go in a punt formation and maybe you motion in like somebody's going to be under center, which brings their punt returner up and makes their rushers stop, but Whalen's still back there. And then you still snap it to Whalen and he can punt and there's no, buddy down to return it. There's different things that you can do just to kind of mix things up a little bit that I don't think take a ton of time. And it just keeps opposing special teams on their toes, and it makes them think when Green Bay's out there. And I think that could be an advantage as well. So I don't need anything exotic. I don't need anything crazy. I don't need Daniel Whalen trying to throw dimes to, Ketan Oladapo. I don't necessarily need that, but I do think that there is a couple things that they could do just to keep opposing special teams on their toes just a little bit more. All right, let's get to all of your wonderful, wonderful questions. Let's see here. Which round is realistic to draft a kicker that can compete for the starting job against McManus? I'll just say this. In general, I'm pretty anti-drafting kickers. It's been pretty hit and miss over the course of time. You're just as likely to find somebody in, undrafted free agency or, on the street that has maybe you just needs a second opportunity more than, trying to pick somebody up in the draft. I'll say this. If it's, sixth or seventh round and kicker is the best player on your board and you want to take one, sure, go for it. All I'll say is whether it's via a late draft pick, undrafted free agency, a free agent, somebody that's cut somewhere, somebody from, that plays soccer somewhere, I don't care, but you've got to be able to have real legitimate competition to Brandon McManus. I don't think Lukas Havrisik is good enough competition. I don't think you need to have 3 kickers in camp. So right now I need to see somebody better than Havrisik come in and really truly compete with McManus in camp. And then may the best man win. And to be fair, and I talked about this the other day as well, McManus was near perfect in training camp and preseason a year ago. He was an absolute machine. And then you get to the regular season and playoffs and he failed. So there's nothing that I'm going to do that could happen to make me believe that things are just going to go perfectly on teams. But at minimum, I do think you need some better competition for McManus. The amount of turnover on our coaching staff has been crazy. And I got to say, I think we've upgraded at almost every spot, even potentially defensive coordinator, as much as I love Half. I think there's always opportunity for growth and improvement and new ideas and fresh thoughts. And I think this is the sort of time of year where still hope springs eternal, right? Jonathan Gannon is fun to think about. It's a new, fresh defense. As much as we like Jeff Hafley, and I think he did a good job, I don't think this defense ever reached their peak. And I don't think they ever really looked to me like a top 5, maybe even top 10 defense. And so if Jonathan Gannon can come in and do that with some new and fresh ideas, there's excitement there. There were still some issues in the secondary. Maybe Bobby Babich can fix that. I didn't think the linebackers played particularly well last year. New linebackers coach, hopefully they can fix that. You've got some new ideas coming in on the offensive side, although a little bit less, right? You're probably losing more there than you're gaining. Overall, I really wish they would have gone and got a new offensive coordinator, a new offensive line coach, I should say. And then on the special team side, hopefully they can find somebody that can, again, bring some new, fresh ideas there as well. I'm excited about it. Could go either way. There's always this idea that new is good, new is better, new is fresh, but new can be worse too. We just don't know. It's tough to say, but I am excited that there's going to be some new minds, new ideas, and just some hopefully exchange of thoughts and how things can be better, maybe a little bit better attention to detail in 2026. Very excited about Noah Pauley specifically, as well as Babich being Gannon's. I don't even know ever how to pronounce that word, if I'm being honest, but I know what it is. I do think Noah Pauley can be a really nice upgrade at wide receivers coach as well. That's a good call out on the offensive side. All right. Xavier Hawk fan. Andy, in your view, how many years did losing Nick Collins set the Packers secondary back? I think about this question often. Such a shame. I can't say enough about Nick Collins. One of my favorite all-time Packers. Absolute stud. No question about it. Set the secondary back in a significant way. Nick Collins this is going to be a crazy statement. Nick Collins was pretty damn close to Ed Reed without hands. Collins still picked off a bunch of passes, but Collins bricked a bunch off of his hands too. And if he just had a little bit better hands, he would have picked off, just so many more passes. But he was so freaking good. And one of the best safeties. I mean, to me, it's Leroy Butler and Nick Collins are the two safeties. No disrespect to Xavier McKinney or any of the other great safeties that have been here. But Leroy Butler and Nick Collins are the two in my lifetime that I've enjoyed watching the most. And he was legitimately awesome. I think it's the same detriment to the defense that losing Nick Collins was. It's similar to what losing David Bakhtiari to injury on the offense was. Just Jermichael Finley too. I mean, they've just had some really devastating injuries that have really cost them. That's not even including guys like Jonathan Franklin and Terrence Murphy, who we never really almost got introduced to. Jonathan Franklin, a 3rd-round pick at running back who had, 120-plus yard rushing game. And then shortly after his career was over. And Terrence Murphy, who looked like was going to be another one of Ted's really great wide receiver picks and had an injury in camp and his career was done. They've had, he was a 2nd-round pick. Just some really, really devastating injuries. And it's been a bummer to see. Yeah, No two ways around it. All right. Buddy of mine went to high school with Cephas, said he's a good dude and has done things the right way, clawed his way up, taking jobs wherever he could get them as a young coach, making a name for himself. Love to hear it. I've heard good things about him as well. And I think he's going to be a really good coach on the defensive side of the ball. And do you think it makes sense to take care of one of the main positions of need before the draft? Yeah, absolutely. They should try to fix as much as they can. And what your ideal goal is, Cheesy Matt, every single year is to try to go into the draft ready to play a game already. Meaning you've got your, basically the most of your 53-man roster in place. You've got starters everywhere that you go into the draft without needing a specific position. Doesn't work that way more often than not, but that's your goal going into it, is to have a team that's ready to play a full game before you start picking anybody. Because if you have a huge hole at corner, or if you have a huge hole at defensive tackle or offensive line, you're going to be pushed in that direction. And what you want as much clarity as possible to say, hey, this is truly the best player on our board. Now, best player available is inherently, melded and molded by need. What I mean by that is, you have your grades, it could be a vertical board, could be a horizontal board. There's different ways to do it, but you have your grades on players. And when you're doing that, there's going to be clusters. It's not perfect. It's not like, this person's a 10 and they're a 9.9 and they're a 9.8 and they're a 9.7 and they're a 9.6. And so like, it's not going to be perfect. Right. And even if it was like that, that's still kind of a cluster of players. And a lot of times you're going to end up with 5, 6, 7 guys that have extremely similar grades. And so when you get to that point, you take those 5, 6, or 7 and you say, all right, these are all equal. Take the offensive lineman, put it to the top, take the corner, put it to the top, take the defensive tackle, put it to the top. And then maybe it's the receiver and then the running back and then the whatever, right? And so you decluster those by breaking it down by need. So when you look at your board, it's still stacked in those clusters by what position you need most. But what you don't want to go into the draft doing is saying, well, I've got, a linebacker that's graded really high, or a pass rusher that's graded really high, and I have a corner or offensive lineman or defensive tackle that is a tier below them, but I really need that specific, position. I don't need linebacker as much, so I'm going to pass on the linebacker that had a tier or 2 above, and I'm going to take that position of need instead. And then that linebacker goes on to be Brian Urlacher or Ray Lewis or Fred Warner or whomever. And you end up with, maybe you even end up with a good player, but it's like, it's a solid, it's like a Ryan Pickett or something, right? Maybe you get a good player that helps you, but you missed out on a generational or Hall of Fame player because you took the wrong one. So that's what you're ideally looking for, is that you can go into the draft with as much need erased as possible. And if they can do that ahead of time, that would be great. And it just allows you to take the best players that are actually on your board rather than having to maybe reach for a need or two. Really like the outside corner Ponce from Indiana. Very small, 5'9", 175. You can basically just take him off your board right now, Cheesy Matt. Can't imagine Green Bay goes his way, but he was a complete menace with his time in Indiana. Yeah. As Ron Wolf would say, if all of a sudden you start making exceptions, you end up with a team full of exceptions. And the reason why that you kind of see it that way is because, or why you think of it that way is, like, a player like that who's really good on tape, who doesn't have the measurables, right? A lot of times they are available at later parts in the draft because they don't have those measurables, and you can get them. And you're like, well, we really liked him on tape, etc. So we're going to grab him and we're going to take him. And when you do that, all of a sudden you take him in the second round, and then you take an undersized defensive tackle in the third round because he's still there. You take an undersized linebacker in the fourth round. You take an undersized wide receiver in the fifth round. And all of a sudden you get out there and you're looking at your team and you're like, oh crap, we've got a 5'9" corner. We've got a 5'8" wide receiver. We've got a 5'11" quarterback. And all of a sudden you've got a team full of exceptions, which is not obviously what you want to be doing. So you can take it from time to time, but once you start making those exceptions, as Ron Wolf said, sometimes you end up with a team full of exceptions. Surprise free agents was a great vid. The Brian Thomas Jr. thing is interesting. Offseason wide receiver moves was not an interest to me until you broke it down like that. I think now it's my favorite hypothetical. Yeah, again, what I would view today's episode as is a Friday fun bag episode, right? Like just let's have some fun thought experiments of what could happen if things would go in a different direction than what we're expecting, right? And to be honest, I wish trades like that I mentioned with the Brian Thomas Jr. would happen just a little bit more often. And you know who else I think wishes they would happen a little bit more often? Brian Gutekunst. And we're starting to see a little bit more of this. Philly's a team that is willing to do some weird stuff with trades. And I'm hoping as you get more in the, kind of Madden generation of general managers that you start seeing more of this over time. But I do think there's some fun, unique ways. If I were Green Bay, I would legitimately really be looking at what young, cheap, talented player can I get for my second and third round picks? I don't that are like, so that's why I've brought up, like Brian Thomas Jr., Jerry Jones, Tavondre Sweat, players like that are, under contract for a couple more years, are super cheap still, but maybe again, don't fit with their team like they once did, like Brian Thomas Jr. Jerry Jones has a couple corners ahead of him. Tavondre Sweat doesn't fit with the scheme anymore. Can you find players like that are still cheap and that are still under team control for a couple seasons that would really help this team and maybe bring it to another level? I would love to spend second and third round picks on that instead of gambling in the draft and saying, we think we can find a guy. No, and especially when you're Green Bay, because you're a draft and develop team, right? More often than not. So a lot of times those second, third, fourth round picks, what do they take? They take 2 years to sort of develop into the player that you want them to be. So you're just taking those 2 years, and Jacksonville, in this case, those deals that I mentioned, Jacksonville and Tennessee, they did the 2 years of developing for you. They got the hard part out of the way. Now you can take your second and third round picks, trade them, maybe get a Sweat, Brian Thomas Jr., Jerry Jones, etc. Bring those guys in. They're ready to play. They're still cheap. Yes, you're going to have to figure out some contract extensions in a couple of years, but you have really a strong 2-year window. So now you get proven players rather than, flyers on draft picks. If you could do some stuff like that, to me, if I'm Goody, that's what I'm looking at. I don't need any picks in the first 3 rounds. If I can, like, if you told me right now, second round pick for Tavondre Sweat, third round pick for Jerry Jones, and maybe even I have to give up a third round pick in Carrington Valentine for Jerry Jones, maybe I have to give up a second round pick in Carl Brooks for Tavondre Sweat. Awesome. All in. Totally 1,000,000,000% in. And yeah, I don't have any picks in the first 100. That sucks. But now I've got Micah Parsons, who I used my first round pick on. I've got Tavondre Sweat at defensive tackle, who I used my second round pick on. I've got Jerry Jones at corner, who I used my third pick on. And my odds that Sweat's better than who I would have taken in the second round. Jones is better who I would have taken in the third. And certainly Micah's better than what I would have taken combined with my 2 first round picks is probably pretty great. So that's what I would be looking at if I were Goody. I don't think he will, but it's a fun look at it. I enjoyed putting together today's episode and glad you liked it as well, TJR. Tell me here otherwise. I'm going to assume Rich was simply waiting until after his darkness retreat to make his decision. Wouldn't that be something? I don't think Rich is the darkness retreat guy, but it is interesting that it seems like he legitimately stepped away. And that is a little bit of a kick in the balls to Green Bay to do it that late, if I'm being honest. But again, don't know the circumstances, don't want to judge. I have no idea, but that's late in the process. Mike was even better than anticipated last year. Do you see an alternate universe where we are better team over the next 1 to 4 years, though, if we don't make that trade? It's tough to say. If we look at it 4 years from now and we look at Green Bay having their first round picks and we see that there were some great players available, picks 27 through 32 this year and some unbelievable players, picks 27 through 32 next year that maybe they could have got instead, and maybe they could have hit gold, and maybe they could use the free agent money that they used on Micah to get Trey Hendrickson this offseason, or to get Jalen Phillips, or do something a little bit different. Maybe, but TJR, how I'm feeling right now is I still make that deal 1,000,000 times out of 1,000,000, and I don't go back and second guess it at all. He's a stud. He fits perfectly on the team, and he's somebody that can ultimately, I think, get you to the promised land. So I would have still done that trade every single time. Been seeing a lot of mocks with a corner in round 2 for Green Bay. So which tackle built like a guard haven't I heard about that will wear green and gold next year? Never know. Hey, I'm fine with that. Continue to build in the trenches. They need to get better there. I just hope they can find somebody that can come in and play if that's the direction that they're going to go. I don't think Morgan was quite ready year 1. I don't think, and maybe even year 2. Belton, I don't think was ready year 1. If they're going to draft somebody early on the offensive line, that's fine. But I need somebody to be able to come in and play and actually give you solid snaps right away. Or it's going to be, probably a level of frustrating again. The amount of Twitter discourse saying Caleb is greater than Love drives my little cat brain crazy. If you don't blow the Chicago game, it's such brutal fashion. No one is saying it. No, they would still say it because it's still just as dumb. It has nothing to do with it. It's ridiculous. Now, listen, I think Caleb made a significant step a season ago. I think he took his game up another level. I think he will take his game up another level in year 2 in Ben Johnson's offense. I think Chicago has found their quarterback. I think he's going to be good. And I think that there's a real chance that 2 years from now, 3 years from now, maybe, I don't think it's a guarantee. I don't think it's necessarily a foregone conclusion. I would still probably guess that Love is better, but there's a real world in a year, 2 years that Caleb is ahead of Jordan Love. But it's not a conversation right now. Jordan's better. It's not close. If you had to take a quarterback to win a game to take this season, 32 GMs out of 32 GMs are taking Jordan Love over Caleb Williams. So, and if they don't, they should be fired. Again, I'm very bullish on what Caleb is going to become. I think he's going to be a very good quarterback, especially with Ben Johnson, but it's not a debate or a conversation right now. Do we as fans and Green Bay media overrate this roster? It sure seems like national voices are down on the Packers, but I still feel like we have a solid roster, though I don't know if I'm looking through green and gold lenses. I don't think so. I mean, Green Bay on the markets I saw come out this week had the same amount of, win. The win over under is as high as any other team, tied with like a bunch of other teams at 10.5 or 11.5. I forget what it was. I think it was 10.5 for win over unders. Like they're right there. They're, I think, top 5, 6, 7 in Super Bowl odds. Let's just look at it right now. Super Bowl odds 2026. Pull one up. All right. If it ever wants to load, it's taking forever. There we go. All right. The Packers are tied for 5th. They're tied for 5th in Super Bowl odds, behind the Seahawks, Rams, Bills, Ravens, and then Green Bay's tied for 5th with the Chiefs, which seems weird with Mahomes and his injury. That seems like a very odd position for the Chiefs, and then tied with the Lions and the Eagles as well. They're a top 10 team. Clearly, they're are arguably a top 5 team, and they're going to compete at a very high level this year. I think there's issues. I don't think they can win a Super Bowl with the offensive line constructed as is. I do think they need another run stuffer up front. And I do think their cornerback room needs some competition at minimum. So I think there's flaws, but I think it's a really, really sound roster. I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. Not that this is anything earth-shattering or earth-breaking, or groundbreaking. But Denver, if they had Bo Nix, would have beat New England in that AFC Championship game. I have zero doubt about that whatsoever. Denver was going to be the AFC Super Bowl team. And Green Bay went into their house, and prior to Christian and Micah injuries, had that game, I'm not going to say in hand or completely under control, but they were ready to beat Denver in that game. And then, of course, all the injuries hit and things go wrong, and they weren't able to bounce back from it. And they still need to be better in, those type of situations. But they were taking it to what would have been the eventual Super Bowl team. And I think Denver would have given Seattle a much bigger fight than what New England did. And Green Bay took it to them in their home building. Green Bay is a very talented team. They're right on the verge, but they are going to have to do some things better in order to get to that point. No question about it. Would Cade Otton be a possible tight end signing? I don't think so, just because I think, if I'm not mistaken, let me check a couple things. He's not a great run blocking tight end. And then I wanted to check one other thing. I guess he's a little bit younger than I was expecting. Here's where you're going to run into some issues. Why is this not? Whatever. Here's where you're going to run into some issues with some, like a player like Cade Otton. Man, it just does not want to work. All right, what the heck? There we go. So Kate Otten is, yes, he's an unrestricted free agent. But here's where you're going to run into issues. Green Bay is probably going to want to try to get 4 comp picks next year. And so they've got 6 unrestricted free agents who are going to get comp picks in all likelihood. You know the names: Rasheed Walker, Sean Ryan, Malik Willis, Kingsley Enagbare, Quay Walker, and Romeo Doubs. Those are your 6. They can cancel 2 of those out by signing free agents, or maybe they bring Sean Ryan back and sign 1 free agent, but they probably want all 4. And where you run into an issue is like, hey, if I want to sign a Devin Lloyd or a Monteric Brown or a Reek Woolen or a big time free agent, I'm okay, if need be, canceling out a comp pick, even if it gets to that point. Even if I bring back Enagbare and I bring back Sean Ryan, now I've got 4 players leaving. If I'm going to sign another big time free agent, I'm okay with canceling one of those out. But I'm not okay with canceling out a 4th or 5th round comp pick to sign Kate Otten or to sign a mid to low tier free agent. So that's where it's going to be a little bit more difficult for Green Bay. Is they're going to want to be cognizant of those picks. So keep an eye on that throughout the time. They have 6 players that are going to get comp picks. They can either re-sign 2 of them and not sign anybody else that's a true unrestricted free agent, or re-sign 1 of them and sign 1 true unrestricted free agent, or re-sign none and sign 2 unrestricted free agents. But I don't think you want to cancel out that 3rd one to only get you 3 comp picks, and especially not for a low tier free agent, right? So just keep an eye on that. Once you get to that point, then look at players who are maybe cut, or see who's left once the comp pick formula freezes. I forget what day it is. I don't know if it's after the draft or whatever, but there's a point in time where it no longer, you can sign a player and it no longer counts against the comp pick formula. They could wait until after that and see if somebody like an Otten or somebody like it is still available. Would you entertain a Dante Banks trade for maybe a Musgrave or something? Giants could use a receiving tight end. Banks has been really bad. Corner is volatile. If I remember to Dante Banks, I don't think he's on the bigger side. Maybe I'm misremembering though. And it's Deontay, right? Yeah, Deontay Banks. He's 24 years old and he is only 6'2", 200. Actually, that's not bad. That's bigger than I thought. If you wanted to take a flyer on it, I don't know that I would trade Musgrave, but trying to think who would make sense in like a player for player trade for a Deontay Banks. It's not much. I'll put it that way. Yeah, I don't know who I would want to sort of trade in that scenario. That's an interesting one. My answer is yes. Maybe like a conditional 2027 7th round pick or something like that, and take a flyer on it. If he makes an impact or starts a couple games, it moves up to a 6th round pick, or sure, I think you could do something like that. But yeah, he does not have a ton of interest. He's been really, really bad. But if you wanted to take the flyer on him and see if you could fix him in Green Bay, sure, go for it. How do you even start to investigate special teams assistants, at least for offensive and defensive coordinator? We can talk about relative performance of position groups. How did you do it? What you're kind of looking for, John, is some players who have connections. I don't know if you're looking for, I'm assuming you mean for the actual special teams coordinator. You look at assistants for teams who have recently had success. So Seattle's a great example of that. And then there were specific ones that I kind of searched out a little bit more. I did some research too on up and coming assistants, and like Jet Modkins was one that came up. And so you can do, some research and study on it that way. But the truth is we're not going to know until, this new coach gets ingrained and in the job and see how they kind of perform. And like I said, I'll believe that they can actually fix it when I see it. But Jet Modkins still, to me, is somebody that I think makes the most sense. Packers were so good at finding smaller offensive linemen, but they seem to be having trouble with oh boy, John, we're taking that one down. I know you didn't mean that, but we're just taking that one down altogether. Theory on the round 1 draft issue: Packers use athleticism as a filter and choose from there. Good, but within that filter, they still favor positional value and athleticism over film and scouting. I don't think that's true. I honestly think they've just got the the scouting wrong. I think more than anything. Goo wants to sign younger players, injuries, upsides, etc., but teams don't want to let good young players walk. Maybe make sense to be more open to older guys on cheap 1-year deals like Robinson and Campbell. Yeah, again, I think they probably need to be a little bit more open to it. This is one where we've talked about too. I like their philosophy, but they probably need to make an exception or two here or there just a little bit more often. Like somebody this year, quite honestly, like a Kevin Zeitler. Right? He's 35, but guess what? He still played at a really high level a year ago, played a really high level at 2 years ago. And if you could have him come in and be a really good guard this year and mentor Anthony Belton for a year, awesome. And if he gets hurt because he's old, all right, well, Anthony Belton's there anyway. But those are things that I think they should probably be a little bit more open to. But I think in general, hey, goal USA, 3-0, love it. But I do think that they have to be, kind of looking at that. But I like overall staying young. It usually makes more sense to do it that way. What move or moves do you want that to signal that the Packers are truly all in to make a championship run? I think that's probably a false equivalency, or it's not. They made their huge move in going to get Micah Parsons. That is as big of a move as you can get. And that was not a 1-year move. That was for 2025, 2026, 2027, 2028. That is a massive move. And a year before that, they signed Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney. And you may not have liked the moves last year, but they spent a ton of money on Aaron Banks and on Nate Hobbs. I don't need to be convinced that this team is trying to go all in to win a championship. They have done a lot already. I would say the only thing that would tell me that, all right, maybe they're a little bit unserious is if they don't restructure any contracts and just completely keep it status quo and really don't sign anybody besides that minimum guys when there are levers and pulleys out there to make some things work. That would be the one thing where I would say, all right, clearly that doesn't work. They scored another one, 4-0 USA. All right, USA, Canada, it is going to be fun. It's like 7 a.m. on Sunday morning, which is brutal, but it'll be a fun game. But either way, back to the point, I do think that they'll do some stuff this offseason, but I already know that they are doing everything in their power based on what they've done the last few seasons in the offseason. Is there one guy Green Bay may look into signing this offseason that you definitely stay away from? I'm sure there is, but I mean, I don't see anything realistic so far that I would be like, oh God, Cade Mays is probably the closest, but he's a solid center and they can use a solid center, but I think they would overpay for Cade Mays, to be honest. That's probably the one that comes to mind. I'd have to look back, but there's not a ton that would give me a ton of fear, if I'm being honest. I would stay away from the Nate Hobbs and Aaron Banks type signings. I don't think that ultimately, kind of gets you to where you want to go. I would try to do something a little bit more proven and not try to look for those upside guys maybe as much, but no, there's nothing off the top of my head that would be like, oh God, but maybe Cade Mays would be the closest to it. Anyway, Green Bay have the cap to sign Woolen and Job to sew up corner, or would it just be too rich for Green Bay considering their cap situation? No, they could. I don't think Job is the right move, to be honest. I think they made it work in Seattle, but I don't think he's a very good corner. But and Woolen, I'm kind of on, but I do. Yes, they can go out and sign 2 good corners if they wanted to sign 2 good corners. Especially because in that scenario, you're probably cutting Nate Hobbs, Keyshawn Nixon, and maybe even Carrington Valentine and saving some money through those transactions as well. His low usage isn't an accurate barometer for success. Had faith in Matthew Golden from the moment his name was announced. Believe he'll put to shame all those who directed negativity towards him. I continue to say he's one of my highest graded players on offense last year. Even given minimal snaps, he looked really, really good on tape. It is a matter of when, not if. He is going to be very good. What level of really good, that remains to be seen. But he's a very talented player. You saw it in the Bears game, and more of that type of stuff is going to happen as he gets more opportunity. Future incoming, yes, it is. Do you know what role of assistant head coach does, and it will be filled by Bisaccia leaving? All right, so we talked about this the other day a little bit, Cora. There's not a role specifically usually for assistant head coach. It's more of a tag that you can pay somebody more money. So if you wanted to bring in, Jeff Stoutland from the Eagles as a new offensive line coach, you could tag assistant head coach to it so that you can pay him a little bit more money. That's a thing that you can do. Give him a little bit better title and a little bit more money. You could do something like that. As far as, would he be more involved in anything? Probably not, to be honest. And they're not going to certainly hire somebody just as an assistant head coach. They would tag it to somebody to give them a pay raise and a title improvement. That's more of what it is. Almost more for aesthetics and looks more than anything, and pay more than anything else. Need a mug or a travel mug in the shop? All right, I'll see if I can. They have them. So I think I used to have one in there. I'll see what I can do and see if I can get that for you, Box Boy. Blame all this mess from end of last season to the Saturday games and our away jerseys switching from green to white socks. Who knows? There seems to be some cursed things going on in Green Bay, so maybe that's one of them. So glad in your special teams video you brought up the Crosby block kick in 21 because nobody does, and it bothers me deeply. Yeah, just a multitude of dumb special teams errors. Very, very frustrating. Do you ever watch the Pat McAfee show? What are your thoughts? I did when, especially in the first year that Aaron was on it, because it felt like I kind of needed to cover the team to some extent. But after that, no. And I thought the later years of the Rodgers McAfee stuff got a little bit weird, but yeah, not my particular brand of vodka or cup of tea, but I think Pat does an unbelievable job in WWE as an announcer, even as a wrestler. He's clearly a very charismatic individual, but yeah, in general, not my brand of vodka. Oh, what did I do? Classic Andy. Thoughts on bringing in Logan Wilson? No, he's been bad. He was really good at the beginning of his career. Like you said, he was good coming out of college, but he's washed up. Wouldn't really have any interest at this point. Yeah. Same thoughts, Ben. Let's see. Seen a draft guide that had 7 corners in the 40 to 60 area. Yeah, it's a good position. Green Bay's in a good position for defensive tackle and corner in that 2nd to 3rd round range. They should be able to find some players that they like. And I think especially corner. If I were a betting person today, I'd probably be putting money that Green Bay will draft a corner in round 2. Certainly offensive line, defensive tackle, and others could be in play, but I think the most likely is corner based on the depth of that position around that range. That tight end, that touchdown that Golden did have, wow, I'm excited to see the ball in his hands more next season because he can run through some tackles and make people miss. He can do everything. He's fast. He's elusive. He knows how to get open. He's a good route runner, amazing hands, was clutch on some 4th down plays. Guys, I'm telling you, it is a matter of time. He is going to be a very, very good football player. Happily see him get more targets in place of Dobbs. He will. But yeah, I see people a lot of times say, hey, I want Dobbs back. Then I see a lot of people say, hey, I want Matthew Golden to get more targets. Mostly incompatible. Reed's going to get a lot of playing time, right? Watson's going to get a lot of playing time. Wicks will get some playing time. If Dobbs is back, he's going to get a lot of playing time. Dobbs leaving opens up those opportunities for specifically Matthew Golden and probably a little bit of Savion Williams as well. Really glad Justice brought up Tim Settle. I've been in on him for a while. My roommate is a Texas fan, so I watched all their games. I really think he's someone who could help without breaking the bank. He's okay. He can probably serve that role. Probably want him playing mostly just run stuffing snaps, 300 snaps, maybe 400 a year. But he can serve a purpose. Just probably depends a little bit more on what the cost would be for Settle. But he could be an option for him. Why do people act like injuries don't matter? Seen tons of people saying no excuse, but if injuries didn't matter, then the entire 53 roster could be on IR and it wouldn't change anything. It matters. It matters. There are things that don't matter, meaning when you're up, 21-3 or whatever the hell it was at half against Chicago, you can't blow that. I don't care about injuries. You can't blow that. That doesn't matter. On the season as a whole, it matters a lot. It matters a lot. They were dead on arrival to have any sort of Super Bowl hopes once Micah and Zach Tom and Devontae Wyatt and Tucker Kraft go down. Like that is a group of insurmountable injuries that you just can't overcome. You can overcome some, you're going to have injuries and you have to overcome some of them, but you can't have 4 of your most important players, arguably 4 of your top 6, 7, 8 players that are out. That's a nightmare situation. The only gimmick that made sense was gold zone for red zone. That's fun. It's special teams. Just leave it there. Yeah, no defense. No, Belton's numbers were not great this year, but I blame that more on coaching. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't care if it's the player, the GM that got it right or wrong, or the coaching. Like, you've got to be able to take a 2nd round pick, put him out there and have him play better than what he did. Were there some signs, some moments? Yes. Do I think he can ultimately, hang at right guard? Yes. But it's going to take a significant step from where he was a year ago. Read somewhere only 50% of players come back from PCL. Zach Tom had a partial tear, but we'll be watching his recovery. That's why I wanted to ask, and that was one of my questions to Brian Gutekunst, was specifically about that PCL injury in Zach Tom. And Goody said that they do not anticipate that his injury will affect him going into the 2026 season or 2026 season. They did say he'd miss a significant amount of time here in the foreseeable future, but said it should not affect his 2026 season at all, which if so, is really great news. Will Redmond was hired as a college scout. It was not the same Will Redmond that was a corner for Green Bay. Two different people. But yes, he was officially hired today. What do you think Matt LaFleur needs to do to get better at end of the half and game time management? When to call timeouts, when to go for two? Feel like that's an area he can improve, but wonder how he would go about it. Yeah, I think some of the execution needs to be a little bit better. And I think it's probably something that he just needs to do some self-study on, to be honest. And I'll say this too. I thought early in his career, Matt was somebody who trusted the analytics a lot, and I loved it. And he's gotten away from that. I think he needs to go back to trusting the analytics much more than what he has. And, listen, you can go away from it every now and again if you're not feeling it, if you think it's the right move to go away from it. But more often than not, I want to see him trust what the analytics say, because I think that's going to serve him better than what basically he's been doing as of late. Not a Packers question again. What's the secret to producing high-level content every single day without burning out? By the way, My Autism Connection appreciates you. Super excited about that as well. We're going to be doing a My Autism Connection show for charity, so keep an eye out for that. But the simple answer to what's the secret for producing content without burning out, you have to have a passion for it. And to me, this is a unbridled passion of mine, and it's exciting to get to talk Packers every day. I'm not saying there's probably, I would say maybe around 10 episodes or 10 days a year where I'm just like, oh, dear God, I just want to go to bed, or I don't want to do this today. There's probably about 10 out of 365. And usually that's because it's like 1:30 in the morning and I'm just like, oh, I don't want to still record this and edit and upload, etc. 5-0 US. What a dominant performance. So yeah, that's usually the case, but no, 355 of the episodes or days of the year, and the happy hours and the members Q&As and everything that goes along with it. I love doing. It's a joy. It's a passion. And that makes it super simple to do. And when you have a legitimate, passionate interest in the team that you're covering too, it makes it fun because, I get to research and talk about things that I'd be interested in as a fan, that I am interested in as a fan. And so that makes it more fun to kind of dig in and research those things as well and talk about them. Oh, Jaden Reed for sure. The question's better career so far, LVN or Jaden Reed? Jaden Reed by a mile, not even close. What do you think Belton's floor and ceiling is next year? I know the metrics weren't great, but I blame a lot of that on coaching failures dating back to training camp. Floor would be what we saw last year, that there's no improvement, that he's basically the same player that he was. And ceiling to me is a solid starting guard. Not great, not good, but a very serviceable. Think kind of like Sean Ryan, a couple years ago, where he played pretty solid, serviceable guard. And you were like, hey, or John Runyon Jr. when he had his really good year, like you were like, hey, that's good play. Like you can win with that at right guard. That's what I'm hoping for, but he's going to have to take a step to get there. Unique idea. No more punt returns. Focus on rushing the punter. Bet the net yardage is better than with bad punts and no blocks. I like the idea in general. B Pennyworth. I think you always have to be multiple in what you do. If you're constantly rushing the punter, you are becoming predictable. B, setting yourself up for potential fakes. And then C, again, they just know to kind of get that punt off quick and to max protect, and that you're, just going to be fair catching it basically anyway. So I like that as a, hey, we're going to do that more often, but you never want to get just ingrained on one thing too much, because other teams will find a way to take advantage of that. Can you reach a peak without Parsons, though? Asking for a friend. No, cannot reach a peak without Parsons. You can still, play really great football, but no, I don't think you can reach your peak. Wish the Packers would place a real emphasis on blocking kicks. Harking back to the days of Mad Stork, Fred Carr, Gary Lewis terrorized opposing kickers. Maybe they will. Maybe with a new special teams coordinator, maybe that's something that they'll try a little bit more of. Yeah, Nick Collins was absolutely amazing. I don't know if he gets quite to Hall of Fame status, but he should have been in the conversation if he would have been able to complete his career. Your dream for improving the Green Bay defensive line, sign me up. Yeah, me too. I'm willing to accept some subpar corner play if it means that they've gone all in on improving their trench play, meaning offensive line and defensive line. Those to me are, it's weird because I think corner needs the biggest makeover, but I just think offensive line and defensive line are more important. And I think if you get better there, it's going to have a larger effect, a force multiplier on the rest of your team more than corner will. So that's where my head's kind of at the moment. Have a confession. I'm cursed. Got a Kraft jersey before his knee injury. Got a Love and Bakhtiari before their knee injuries. I had both my knees replaced, never getting active players' jerseys. Maybe just, maybe some Bears jerseys, maybe some Vikings jerseys. I know it's not fashionable. I know it's not great, but, just throwing it out there. Just thinking outside the box a little bit, Big Cheese. You have a superpower. You have a choice. Do you want to use it for good or evil? So far, you've not been using it appropriately. Maybe just change your thought process a little bit, my friend. Nick, thank you for the super chat. Awesome of you. Really kind of you. Do you have any info on O-line players on the roster that didn't play last year that the coaches Goody have expressed faith in being able to play yet, like Williams, etc.? No, other than I do think that they really like Travis Glover. He's a name that I would keep an eye out for. If nothing else, I don't think that there's going to be a starting, possibility for him, but I do think that he will be one of the top backups going into next year. And I think they wanted him to kind of be that a year ago too. So he's one I think they probably like, and just to kind of keep an eye out for. Outside of that, no. But, John Williams, Jacob Monk, amongst others, will still be interesting to keep an eye on. But the one I'd keep the biggest eye on would be Travis Glover. Forgot the message. Would you consider giving Aubrey $10 million a year to fix the kicking problem? Probably not, just because I do think kicker is fickle. And you see kickers have high variance year over year. But if he was available, I would definitely be trying to do what I could to get him in Green Bay. But $10 million a year might be a little bit on the over. I'd consider it. But probably not my first choice, if I'm being honest. Saw an article about X not taking a step back last year, even though the numbers were not as good. I know he played great, but if I recall, he had a few drop picks. How do you grade drop picks? Drop picks are negatively graded because it's an opportunity. It's basically a turnover for yourself. You have an opportunity to get the ball and it should be your ball. And then now it's not. Now you can have it even out sometimes. So for example, there's a difference. There was that play in the playoff game against San Fran where Darnell Savage dropped the pick, right? Darnell Savage did nothing on that play to set himself up for the interception. He is chilling in his zone, just sitting there, basically didn't move. 49ers quarterback throws it. I think it was Purdy, right? Purdy throws it right to Darnell Savage. Savage drops it. That is a massive negative. There have been plays for Xavier McKinney or others where they range over, make an unbelievable play. Like shouldn't have probably even been in a position to intercept the ball in the first place and then have the dropped interception. That to me is still a overall positive because they got there, broke up the pass, and like they worked to get to that point. Now they dropped it, so it's not as good as it would have been, obviously, if they picked it off. And there's a slight negative there for dropping it as well. But it's an overall positive play. If you're just chilling in a zone, didn't do anything, that's just where you were supposed to be, and the quarterback throws it to you and you drop it, that's a much bigger negative. But as far as McKinney goes for grades, I do think that he had a really nice season still, and I don't think people quite gave him the credit that he deserved. For me though, in 2024, he had a plus 6.6 grade. In 2025, he had a plus 3.05 grade. So he was still a down for me, in large part due to just not converting some of those interceptions like he did in 2025. But if you look at his overall body of work, despite the dropped interceptions, he still played at a very, very high level. And I loved what he did on defense overall. I do believe Ross is going to be back for daily draft. I know he's still working through some things. I haven't finalized anything yet, but my hope is that he will be at some point in time, but we have not finalized anything as of yet. Jacob and Jacob on Tuesday, Pack-A-Day has been stellar. Yeah, those guys are always great. Just a great reminder here as well from Dennis. If you are just here on YouTube, you are really missing out on some unbelievable content because we have a full team of people on the audio side, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your favorite podcasts. I'm going to try to remember this as best as I can. Mondays is Camille Davis, Dan Kotnick, and Monty Moore. They do an unbelievable job. Tuesdays is Jacob Morley and Jacob Westendorf, and get another unbelievable. All of these are unbelievable teams. Wednesday is Dusty Evely, Sarah Kelleher, and Steve Perhatch. Thursdays are Mark Eckel and Jason Perrone. Friday is Aaron Ellis, Jen Curtin, and Jimmy Christensen. Then Saturday is Matt Freilich, Eli Berkovitz, and Janelle Mackey. And then Sunday is Nick Schmitz and Jimmy Christensen again. So we have a full awesome team, new podcast every single day outside of my own. And if you're missing those, you are missing some really, really good stuff. So make sure you are checking out the audio podcast as well. All right, let's get in our sleeper picks. Appreciate Sleeper for sponsoring today's show. We've got some basketball picks coming in for tonight. Kevin Porter Jr. from Milwaukee. I am saying he is not going to get a double-double tonight, so fewer than one double-double. So no double-double for Kevin Porter Jr. Cam Thomas, I'm going to say more than 15.5 points for him. He's a microwave scorer. He's a bucket waiting to happen, more than 15.5 points. James Harden, he's kind of held back a little bit in Cleveland so far. He's been focusing on, letting everyone else get involved. He's been passing more. I think tonight against Charlotte is when he goes for some serious points, more than 20.5 points for James Harden tonight. Those are my 3 picks. You can tail them. You can pick your own. That's the beauty of Sleeper. Check them out. As soon as you get a chance, make sure you're downloading that Sleeper app. You can also get a 100% match up to $100 by utilizing code PACKADAY. Again, 100% match up to $100 by utilizing code PACKADAY. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper for details. They're available in over 25 states nationwide. All right, back to our regularly scheduled program. All right. Always tough to find our last spot. I don't know why it makes it difficult like it, but it always does. All right, here we go. Jennings, Glover, Williams, Brant Banks, Dalton Cooper. Any chance any of those guys become at least an average starter? I'll believe average starter when I see it, but Travis Glover is the one I would keep an extra eye on. The Packers devote little practice time and few roster spots to special teams. Does that hurt their ability to attract an up-and-coming coordinator? It is hard to recover if your first shot fails, and they do not seem to set coordinators up for success. I think this would be more of a concern if like Darren Rizzi or somebody like that were available again, of do you want to go to Green Bay where everyone's basically been worse, or do I want to go somewhere else? If I were a well-established special teams coordinator, I would say I'm good. I can find another job. At this point in time, where everybody that Green Bay is going to be looking at, hopefully not firing eventually, but they're looking to hire are coordinators that are out of work, meaning they don't have a job lined up right now. They had one last year and they no longer do. Or young or at least up and coming special teams coordinators who have not had an opportunity to be a special teams coordinator, or somebody from the college ranks that's working their way into the NFL. So in those situations, those are all scenarios where they're probably loving the opportunity to get a special teams coordinator position. And as Justice talked about, there are very few of these. There are 32 in the NFL. NFL and college are different. And there's another 32 that are assistant special teams coaches. There's like at any given time, 100 or fewer people on earth who can be a special teams coordinator, assistant special teams coordinator. There's just not many, right? And so when you get the opportunity to be one of those 32, even if it doesn't go great, you now have special teams coordinator experience, and there are just so few of those that are out there. So it is still an opportunity to go out and prove yourself. And I still think anybody, at least that's still out there now, will have legitimate interest in Green Bay's position. What do you think about if we don't re-sign Quay Walker, going with signing Nakobe Dean? I think Dean will probably be a little bit out of their price range, and I don't think he's their exact cup of tea at linebacker. Leo Chanel, I think, would be probably your better guess and better bet there if they wanted to go with a linebacker. I think Chanel would actually be better in their system, fit next to Coop better, and actually think he's going to be a little bit cheaper. But if they went with Dean, I would be totally fine with it. I just don't necessarily see them doing it. Seems like this year's draft is viewed as being a little bit weaker. Maybe the front office shared that view and further justified the Parsons trade. Could be. They know that stuff usually ahead of time. I will say, though, I think the top 5 to 10 is a little bit weaker than normal. But I think the rest of the draft is a very, very normal draft with the depth that you would normally see in any other draft. So, you maybe don't have the elite top tier, no doubt about it, quarterback prospect, although I do think Mendoza is pretty darn good. I think he's probably more, I watched a lot of Mendoza. I do think he is a more athletic Jared Goff. I've seen people say Matt Ryan. I've seen people say others. To me, reminds me very much of Jared Goff with a little bit more athleticism. So to me, he's kind of in that category. And then after that, a lot of your next premium players, are off-ball linebackers or some running backs. I don't think you have like the Julio Jones type wide receiver. I don't think you have the, Myles Garrett type defensive end or Will Anderson Jr. type defensive end. So I think the top is down just a little bit. But then once you get to around, pick 8, 10, 12, and the rest of the draft is really solid like you would normally expect it to be in any given year. Love is absolutely better than Caleb at the moment. To me, it's just hilarious because the few bad things that Love does, Caleb does more of it in bunches, and it's not even close. Well said, Ben. Hopefully Caleb remains inconsistent. Absolutely. We need that draft content. Yes, it'll happen. It'll be here. What's LeVar? Oh, no, that's thought there was a goal for a second, but no, we're just watching replays. We'll get there. And like I said, hopefully Ross will be here before you know it, doing some draft content. Congrats to the U.S. women's hockey team. What an unbelievable game yesterday. Hockey playoffs or hockey Olympics has been unbelievable. Just game in and game out. I mean, the men's 2 days ago was just like 3 overtime games. Just really, really fun. And then the women's, game, which went down to overtime as well, 3-on-3. What an unbelievable game. And to get the goal in the final couple minutes to tie it up and then get the one in overtime. Just all out amazing for Olympic hockey so far. My favorite Olympic sport in either summer or winter, one of the only ones that I actually dedicate time to. So cool. Hoping, certainly seems like we're going to get up 5-0 right now. A Canada-US, beautiful, glorious gold medal game. Again, it just sucks Sunday morning early. Andy, glad Pearl is happy to be here. How many years do you think Matt LaFleur was given for his extension? It's weird it hasn't been announced yet. Not weird it hasn't been announced. They don't ever announce that. It's going to have to take somebody reporting on it and getting that information. I wish they would report it, but they don't. There's no SPO track or over the cap for coaches. It's not publicly, public information. So I wish we knew. We don't. My guess is he probably got a 4-year extension. For some reason, my chat was missed. But where do you think Green Bay will address free agency over draft? I would guess defensive tackle. So sometimes if you get questions in really early, it cuts off before I get here and I can't see them. So I apologize for that, Pearl the cat. Or if I just missed it, I apologize even more. But yeah, sometimes it does that. I would say it just depends. I don't think it's as easy as that. I think you have to take each decision on its own volition, on its own accord. And so, I'm going to be looking at corner, defensive tackle, and offensive line in free agency. And I'm going to, be negotiating with multiple players that I think can come in and help. And I'm going to try to fill as many of those gaps as I can before the draft. And then, same thing with the draft. And once the draft comes and goes, I'm going to try to take the best player available as much as I can. Then once we get through the draft and through free agency, if I look at my roster and say, hey, we're still lacking corner, we're still lacking defensive tackle, we're still lacking an offensive lineman, all right, then maybe we need to look in the trade market, or maybe we need to, try some different things and see what you can do. But I think for the most part, you want to take each of those decisions on its own, while obviously at the forefront of your mind, knowing that defensive tackle, corner, and offensive line are the 3 positions that you'd like to improve the most. If you were Gooch, Jacobs, Walker, or Hall, all dollars and cents. So it would just depend on the money for each of them. I would lean in general towards Josh Jacobs coming back, but I do think that there's a real argument to be made that if the money is actually similar and you can get 2 to 3 years younger at the position and have a little bit fresher legs, that you would at least have to consider that if you were Goody. But I expect Jacobs to be back. I kind of want Jacobs to be back, but it would be a conversation I'd be having depending on what the money would be for Walker and Hall. Did we ever mention how bizarre the Devondre Campbell All-Pro year was? Did the tape match that, or was it just crazy PR? Not crazy PR. Had a legitimately really good season that year. Now, in most seasons, do I think what Devondre did that year would have been first-team All-Pro worthy? No, but it was a down year for linebacker play. There wasn't anybody that stood out. He was very much worthy of being in the conversation. The tape was really, really good that year from Devondre. He made some really big impact plays. And so I had no issue with it. I think it was in a general year, probably closer to a second team All-Pro than a first team All-Pro. But based on how that year went for linebackers, I think he had a legitimate claim or at least argument to be in the first team conversation. And I had no issue with him getting that whatsoever. And then took a step back in the year following, and then just complete downhill after that. Yeah, Ben's correct. Say Dallas offers Kenny with 2 first-round picks and 2 sevenths to have Micah back. Would you do it? No. No chance. First of all, Kenny has no trade value at the moment. The 2 sevenths do nothing. And so would I do 2 first-round picks for Micah? No chance. No chance in hell. What the heck was Goot thinking when he paid Banks that much money? Even at the time, it was considered an overpay. I know what he was doing. I know what he was thinking on multiple levels. First and foremost, Banks was the offensive line version of what Za'Darius was on the defensive line. Banks was coming off his best year in San Fran. Was a little bit injured, but when he played well. I went back and graded every play on that. I really liked what I saw out of Aaron Banks in San Fran in his last year, especially prior to the injury. He looked really, really good. And so, in general, starting offensive linemen are really difficult to find. And Rasheed Walker, some team is going to give Rasheed Walker 20 plus million. There were the Dan Moore 20 plus million left tackle contracts last year. And those were bad offensive linemen that were getting 20 million. Now, tackle is more important than guard, but you get my point. They were bad offensive linemen getting 20 million. Banks actually looked like a legitimately solid starting guard that they were under the belief that they would get him in and he would take another step. That final year in San Fran was the stepping stone into who he was going to become. And while it probably, if that would have happened, the 20 million is probably close to being worth it. If he just would have been good, solid, like a good, solid starting guard, not great, not Pro Bowl, not anything like that, a good, solid starting guard, while the 20 million would have been an overpay, nobody would have had an issue with it. It would have been a bummer that maybe they spent that much, but like that's probably a $15 to $16 million player. And so paying $4 million more is not the end of the world. But you can't, and I do think a lot of it was due to injuries, or at least some of it, but you can't be below average. And he was slightly below average, not a ton, but he was slightly below average. And now it looks like a nightmare deal. Now, Goody said in his press conference of like, hey, once he got back healthy, he played much better. And I went back and I looked at my grades. And for Aaron Banks, over his first 8 games of the season, just pull this up really quick here. First 8 games of the season for Aaron Banks, he had a grade of negative 1.30 in the first 7 games that he played. Negative 1.30. And the next 8 games that he played, the final 8 games that he played, he had a plus 1.25 grade, including being one of the players in that Bears game that actually played really well in that game. So he did get better as the year went along. And once he got healthy, there was a better level of play. And if you take that final 9 games or 8 games of plus 1.25 and expand it to double it, right, to a 16-game season, and he was at plus 2.5, that's a good player on the offensive line. That is a good, valuable player on your offensive line. Now he has to stay healthy, and he has to do that for a full season. But if he can, that player legitimately helps you. So I'm hoping, I don't necessarily believe it. As I've said, I would probably let him go just because I don't think the money's worth it. But I'm hoping that the injuries were the major factor and that he can play much more like he did in the second half of the year and do it for a full season, and he can stay healthy. And if that's the case, it's still going to look bad, but it won't be anything egregious. It'll just be like, oh, they overpaid for a good guard, which is fine. He can't be a bad guard. Last year, for the most part, again, bad, below average, whatever you want to view it as, he just wasn't good enough. They'll likely release him and then see what Kenny tests on the market. If no one picks him up for the money he wants, see if he will come back, but I doubt it. I'm assuming we're talking Kenny there. We do not know yet if it's going to be 3-4 or 4-3. I'm begging the Packers to do a press conference with Jonathan Gannon. I don't know why we haven't got it yet, but hopefully we get one soon. If quarters, let's just bring back Stokes for 2 years. It's not the worst idea. It's still not probably something that I would love, but he does play quarters much better. He did that in his first year more, did it last year more, could actually be a legitimate fit. Do you remember if the Packers had a pre-draft meeting with Linderbaum? I tried scouring the internet, but couldn't find anything. What year was he drafted? Must have been what, 2020? All right, so 2022 Packers pre-draft visits. All right, 30 visits in 2022. Treylon Burks, Sam Williams, Tyquan Thornton, Velus Jones Jr., George Pickens, Josh Thompson, Eric Johnson, Tariq Carpenter, Samori Toure, Devontae Wyatt, Abraham Lucas, Christian Watson, Perion Winfrey, Bam Olaseni, Jaquan Brisker, Rasheed Walker, Kevin Atkins, Romeo Dobbs, John Fitzpatrick, Tyler Smith, Darian Kennard, Ed Ingram, Drake Jackson, Kyron Johnson, Jake Cochran, Benji Franklin, Greg Jr., Deron Bland, Gene DeLance, and Jameer Johnson. So no, they did not. But that is crazy. So at some point in time, Tariq Carpenter, Samori Toure, Devontae Wyatt, Christian Watson, Rasheed Walker, Romeo Dobbs, John Fitzpatrick, Darian Kennard, Benji Franklin, Gregory Jr., Gene DeLance, 11 of their top 30 visits from that year ended up in Green Bay at some point in time. That is a wild, wild number. Imagine me telling you of their top 30 visits that 1 out of 3 would become a Packer at some point in time. That is crazy. That is absolutely crazy. Donkey Kong, are you you're a Lions fan. That makes more sense. You mentioned Devin Lloyd and Cooper this morning. How about Chanel and Cooper? Yeah, I talked about him before, which is why I didn't bring him up this morning. But Chanel makes a lot of sense for Green Bay. Do the Packers need to address the primary starting center in the draft? Jenkins is gone and Ryan is simply not at the required level. Logan Jones in round 3 or 4. I would prefer free agency, rookie offensive linemen, especially ones that you're getting on late day 2. Not a great track record. So I would prefer a free agent, if I'm being honest, Anthony. Not having Micah in a game up 21-3 isn't, no, of course it's not. No chance at all. I'd love to see Dunker, Linderbaum, Belton, mauling interior. Could see that. Be fun. My opinion, the criticism about LaFleur's time management is a little overblown. He's won 66% of his games. How many games has that been the actual reason that they lost? I think it's probably a little bit overblown as well, but there have been instances of it. And even in some of the wins, there's been instances like around, end of the second quarter or before halftime that they maybe didn't play or they didn't manage things quite the way that they should have. Is there hope for special teams? No hope. Have no hope for special teams. I will have hope once I see at the end of the year that they actually put together a competent special teams and they didn't blow it in the playoffs. But I have no hope. And I'm a very hopeful person. I am completely jaded when it comes to special teams. Packers have the second most block kicks in the league under Bisaccia, behind only the Steelers. That feels about right. Can we really just get some average returners on both and then better kickoffs? Coverage is decent. That would help a lot of things. Help a lot. Where the heck is the background? I can't believe how invested I am. Don't have an update yet. I was hoping before free agency. That does not look like it's going to happen. I'm very, very hopeful that it'll be done before the draft. Very, very hopeful it'll be done before the draft. If Derek Moore is at 52 running that card in, I need to take a look at him. I have not had the chance to watch him yet. Show today was excellent. Your off-season content is top-notch. Gravedigger, I really appreciate that a ton. And more importantly, thank you for being a member for 29 months. Not a lot of high-end quarterbacks going to take away some potential Packers picks. Yeah, that'd be more of a bummer if they were picking at like 20 or something. There's going to be 51 guys gone when they get at pick 52. I'm not as concerned about it. They're going to have to take whatever's left one way or the other. Caleb's highlights distract people from how bad. I wouldn't say bad. There's issues still. He'll probably play for 50 minutes. Then he has he'll play horribly for 50 minutes, has a few crazy plays, and people think he's amazing. I do think he took a step in the end of the year. I do think he legitimately did. I think he's going to be a pain to play against, but he still has flaws, and he's going to have to figure out a way to correct those. Or just don't. That'd be great too. Do you think we need a running back and tight end? Yes. But, do I think that they could get, if Lloyd could somehow stay healthy and they bring back Brooks and Wilson and obviously Jacobs, I'm totally good with that quadruple team of running backs still. And at tight end, though, they need a blocking tight end. They got to figure that out. And I would prefer some competition too. So yes, I do think they could use specifically tight end, maybe running back. All right. Still unsure why we're talking so much about free agents. From what I've gathered from the Justice episodes, we're pinching pennies just to sign draft picks. We're entering cap hell people. Yeah, so we've talked about it. They have the ability to open up space if they want to, as Goody said as well. Justice isn't wrong in the fact that they're very limited in what they can do, but they have the ability to make a couple moves. I think one big one, and then a couple minor moves after that. It's good, Andy. The buzz around the league on Stoutland. Think he coaches next season somewhere. Would have assumed he'd be on a staff by now. I've not heard anything. Justice Moscato. I wish I did. Wish I had a better update. I wish I was updating you that he's signed a contract in Green Bay, but I've not heard anything, to be honest. Engine, you're more than welcome for the happy hour. As Justice has said, that won't really matter. The contracts are building up, and there's a real chance we have a 2-year window before we have to blow it back up and tank. I would, again, that's just not how Green Bay does things. They have the ability and flexibility to make a couple moves, just not going to be anything, crazy aggressive at this point. There's still some levers and pulleys to utilize, though. I don't know if they would have been interested in Linderbaum exactly because they got Josh the year before. Yeah, they probably wouldn't have been at that time. You're correct. We'll love an Andy Herman and Peter Bukowski podcast. We've done it before. I'm sure it'll happen again. Don't know when, don't know where, don't know anything else, but I'm sure that'll definitely happen again at some point. Appreciate the super chat, Jack. The Packers, the only team that doesn't specialize in returning. I'd have to look at that a little bit closer. My guess is probably not, but they certainly de-emphasize it seemingly more than just about anybody. Goot doesn't believe in getting a true returner, would rather draft guys and make them return who have never had or returned kicks in the past. I will say to Goody's defense, in some real way, I would have expected, based on skill sets, that Savion Williams would have been a really good kick returner and that Matthew Golden would have been a really good punt returner. I would have been willing to bet on both of those things. And I would have bet that Jaden Reed would have been a great punt returner. And for some reason, they're just not. And I don't think it's just blocking, because the vision and the hesitancy and the catching has not been great either. But on paper, if you're like drawing up a punt returner, I mean, Jaden Reed and Matthew Golden, you can't get much better on paper than what they should be able to bring to the table. And kick returner, Savion Williams fits that part very well as well. And just didn't work. Internet's still a little glitchy. Sorry for that. I haven't seen it on my end, but apologize that it's happening on your end. Been 8 years with Matt and Goot. Why should fans be more optimistic about the organization who are just so good? Again, I will say this, even despite, some injuries late, but more importantly than that, even, after the Tucker Kraft injury, I guess, before Micah and Christian, they were taking it to the team that was ultimately going to be the team in the Super Bowl in the Denver Broncos. And I think you can see Green Bay's flaws because you are watching them very closely. Every other team has pretty equal, and in a lot of cases, worse flaws than what Green Bay has. Seattle has legitimate flaws. Their offensive line is not that great. They have issues at some of their skill positions. I know Jackson Smith and Jigba's great, but it's not like they have a stud tight end. Kupp is towards the end of his career. Kenneth Walker's probably leaving in free agency this year. And they're Josh Jobe is a legitimately bad corner that they're starting at outside corner. They get away with it? Yes. Every team has flaws on it. And you have to find a way to overcome that. This is a massively talented Packers team that does have some flaws, just like other teams, but you are viewing these things in in comparing it to perfection of they're not perfect, so therefore it's bad. And the truth is, the degree of difference between Seattle and Green Bay is razor thin. It's certainly if they're healthy. If they are missing 4 of their top 6 players, then no, it's probably not. But imagine I would have told you that things were reversed last year and Green Bay had all of their top players still available, like Seattle mostly did. And Seattle was without their top defensive tackle. They would have been without their top tight end. They would have been without their top, pass rusher. They would have been without their top tackle. Just losing their top tackle alone would have really, really hurt Seattle's offense. Charles Cross is really freaking good. So imagine you do that and you switch. My guess, Green Bay's in the Super Bowl and Seattle's not. I legitimately believe that. So yeah, it's a razor thin margin, and it's a war of attrition, and you've got to get things right when you have the opportunity to get it right. And guess what? I wish Green Bay would have had the opportunity to go to Seattle and play that game, and they should have if they didn't blow it at the end. And I'm as pissed off as anybody that they blew it and we didn't get the opportunity to see that. But the difference right now is very minimal, and I do think that they were on the right path going into, coming out of that Broncos game. If they win that and don't have the injuries, they would have been on the path for a potential Super Bowl appearance last year. Amari Rodgers did return in college, did not work out in the pros. Why? Who do you feel are our top 10 best players, and how does that compare to other teams' top 10? Not going to take the time to compare to 31 other teams' top 10s, but in some order, Jordan Love, Josh Jacobs, Christian Watson, Tucker Kraft, Zach Tom, Micah Parsons, Edgerrin Cooper, Evan Williams, Xavier McKinney, Devontae Wyatt. Those are probably off the top of my head your top 10 players. Daniel Whalen could be in that conversation as well. All right, friends, I do have to get out of here. Went a little bit long, but got to everyone's questions. I hope I didn't miss anybody. Think we got to all the super chats. All right. Appreciate you guys. We did Sleeper. Remember to get yourself some Luigi's frozen pizzas. I will see you guys tomorrow. Next week, members only Q&A will be on Monday. Happy hour will be on Tuesday. I leave for vacation on Wednesday. Great time to sign up to be a member. I'm about to upload. I already got Dusty Evely's episode uploaded. I'm going to be uploading Tyler Brooks' episode coming up. I got Pete Doherty coming up. I've got Maggie Loney coming up. Hoping to have a couple other ones done in advance as well. And then, of course, members Q&A coming up next Tuesday. So great time to check out those memberships. I will see you guys all very, very soon. Have a very safe and happy weekend. Enjoy the rest of the U.S. game if you're watching it. Till next time. And as always, go Pack Go.